This semester, I track climate change on Twitter. Climate change has recently become a hot topic, so I took to Twitter to find out what the internet thinks of it. For 69 days from February 2nd to April 12th, I scraped Twitter data on 107,204 tweets on the hashtag climate change. I picked 5 random days and graphed how many people were using the hashtag climate change per day on Twitter, and it looked like this, which was neat, but I wanted more, so I expanded it to 9 days. Now this was way more telling, but then I wanted to know why there was so much fluctuation. And since climate change doesn't really fluctuate too much day to day, I had a feeling it must have something to do with media coverage, so I pulled the title of the most popular climate change related news article of the day and overlaid it with a tweets per day graph. It makes sense that more people are going to tweet a news article about how only a quarter of Trump voters believe in human-caused climate change, compared to an article about why climate change is good news for wasps.
Well, I'm not a big believer in man-made climate change. There could be some impact, but I don't believe it's a devastating impact.
I also made an open source network analysis for the hashtag climate change. Other than these big nodes, there are a lot of little stranglers with a few edges between many separate nodes. This likely means everyday regular people are generally tweeting about climate change, but since they aren't a bigwig Twitter user with lots of followers, they have few edges, but at least their friends agree with them and are tweeting back and forth. I think this is really important, especially with climate change, because it shows many different types of people are talking about climate change. I also noticed that most of the tweets and popular nodes in this dataset are all pro-climate change reform. The large nodes are accounts that are trying to raise awareness of climate change, which is what I've been finding throughout my semester of data scraping. Basically, there's no one good conversation about climate change, but lots of people are having their own conversations about it. Some of my findings are that media coverage and current events definitely affects climate change chatter on Twitter, but that's just Twitter, and not the real world. Tarleton Gillespie begs the question, are trends an accurate barometer of the public discussion? He says, trends measures activity on Twitter, and it is only implicitly indicative of broader public concerns. I have to say I disagree with him, because I think in general, Twitter isn't representative of the public's concern. Again, just because more people are tweeting about climate change on a particular day on Twitter does not mean the general public is more concerned with climate change that day. In fact, as the frequency graph suggests, it has more to do with what the media is covering on climate change that day, rather than the severity of the issue. I would say Twitter is an accurate barometer of the virality of news articles, but definitely not for the public concern for topics such as climate change in general. Overall, I've concluded that there's definitely a difference between hashtag climate change versus climate change. Also, Twitter is not the real world and does not accurately depict real-world concerns. What I've found most encouraging is that there's lots of different conversations about climate change on Twitter, which I guess is somewhat promising for our future.